again, lovies. It's David McGillivray here, horror icon, comedy legend. The show is called Little Did You Know. It's a chat show in which I talk to people I find interesting. I hope you agree. And at this point, I normally do this, and up comes a link to Patreon because Patreon subscribers to this show get all kinds of goodies, including this. Yes, it's my autobiography. Let's just have a look in here at the cover price, shall we? Oh my goodness, £20. But Patreon subscribers get it for free, along with lots of other stuff, including 15 minutes of bonus material with my guest. Well, that brings us on to my guest. Oh no! Before I do that, let me just say that it's we're recording this on Monday, the 18th of January, and we've just heard that more vaccinations are being rolled out. Haven't had mine yet, so that's why we're still on Zoom. But maybe before too much longer, we'll be back to face interviews. Who knows? Yes, my guest now. He's a casting director, but as I so often say about my guests, I'm interested in him because he's done so much other stuff as well. First of all, he's been in one of the most bizarre films ever made. I'm not exaggerating. He's also been in an episode of a TV series that was never broadcast. Interesting, yes. And he's also a tea girl. Now, I wasn't sure what a tea girl was about 10 years ago. They were almost new then. I'm not referring to a nippy at Lyons Corner House, and almost nobody watching this will know what I'm referring to. What I'm saying is that no, he doesn't say, "Can I take your order now, sir?" He is a cross dresser. Tea is an aspect of the T in LGBT. Now, he has never talked about this in public before. We've talked about this before, but in that interview 10 years ago, he was anonymous. But today, no, out and proud. Will you please say hello to the very wonderful Paul de Freitas?
Hello, how are you?
I'm marvellous, Paul.
Good.
I hope you are too, and that you're not overly anxious about this chat we're going to have.
No, I'm not. In fact, I was quite intrigued by some of the things you mentioned in the intro, but I'm sure we'll touch upon them as we proceed with our little chat.
Oh, good, good, because I don't want you to be worried about this.
No,
I'm going to give you a very easy ride.
thank you.
Now, De Freitas, something tells me you must have had a bit of Portuguese in you at one time.
Well, my father is actually from South America, from British Guyana, which is just above Brazil, and it must have been at some point a Portuguese colony. So that's where the name. So the name is Portuguese, and that's where that comes from.
It is. So, what intrigues me is that you're not the only one. There are at least another two Paul de Freitases.
Yeah,
One's a TV producer,
he is.
one's an actor in Australia. But
Oh,
what happens is that all your credits, all three of you, all get mixed up on
they do.
IMDb. Have you ever fancied sorting them all out?
Uh, no, I have noticed that, and I've met the producer Paul de Freitas, who um, he's a very nice, very kind of straight sort of fella, and somebody was telling a story about me being in Brazil and meeting young men and going down and said, well, you know, Paul de Freitas met all these guys in Brazil and was going to, and whoever was telling the story thought they were talking about the other Paul de Freitas, who, as far as I know, is married to a woman and got a family and is so it got a bit kind of cross wires there. But I've never bothered about changing the credits at all.
It does. It does all get a bit confusing, I know, because
It does.
yes, I've come across another David McGillivray. You're speaking to us from your lovely flat in Brighton,
I
but
am.
I happen to know you've got a pied-à-terre in London as well.
I have. I live in a very lovely mews in Marylebone, and I've been there for 30 years. About 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to maybe just have a change. I didn't want to leave the Muse house, so I just bought a very nice, large one-bedroom flat right on the front in Brighton.
Oh, gorgeous. Now, is it true that your lovely Muse flat in London is the same Muse in which Johnny Edgecombe fired a gun at Christine Keeler's house, and Christine Keeler was the woman who was partially responsible for bringing down the Conservative government in 1964?
Yes, absolutely true. Yeah, the Perfumer affair all took place down the Muse that I live in, and we get people down there all the time taking photos. And indeed, we even used to get Christine Keeler coming down and having photos taken. It's a beautiful cobbled Muse. I mean, you've been there. It's a lovely place, which is why I didn't want to leave it. And it's full of history, full of character, and I'm smack bang right in the centre of the West End of London. So I've got Regent Street, Oxford Street, Marylebone High Street, obviously, and all on my doorstep. So that's why I didn't want to leave completely. And yeah, I felt like I wanted a bit of a change. So I've got lots of friends in Brighton and two really good friends, John and Jono, and they encouraged me to get this flat. And, they did it all up for me. They were amazing, fantastic. And it's really lovely. It makes me appreciate London more, and I appreciate Brighton too.
Well, I haven't been to your place in Brighton. I have been to your lovely Muse flat. I think probably originally I was like all the other tourists going down there and looking for Christine Keeler's house. It wasn't her house, of course. She was just staying there. It belonged to the tragic Stephen Ward.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated by the history. Later on, I went to Hatchard's and I got Christine Keeler
Oh, yes.
to sign her autobiography for me.
Did you? How amazing. Lovely.
That was
Really lovely.
that was a thrill.
Yeah.
Now, I have a feeling, Paul, that one of the credits on IMDb for Paul de Freitas is definitely the Paul de Freitas I'm talking to, because
Okay.
that Paul de Freitas was a kid in the film of Bugsy Malone in 1976. Am I right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was one of the Sylvia Young sort of kids, the original gang 50 years ago. And Sylvia then opened up an agency. And then so she started sending us up for things. I auditioned for the part of Bugsy Malone himself. And anyway, I ended up with a tiny, tiny little bit in it where I had to sing Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? And it was great fun. It was really lovely. It was 2 or 3 days at the Richmond Theatre with Bonnie Langford, who I then remained good friends with and still am, for all these years. Alan Parker was directing it. I met Jodie Foster and all people like that. It was really amazing, really, really fantastic time. And not having a great childhood, it was great to be able to escape to somewhere like that. And that's when I knew I wanted to be in the business.
Oh, you've opened a can of worms there. Why didn't you have a great childhood, Paul?
Well, my parents split up and the family split up with it. I was with my mother and my sister, and my brothers stayed with my father, and we all kind of just drifted apart. We never really patched that up. So it wasn't a particularly happy childhood. I mean, I was fine, but people have far worse experiences than me. But having to doing these little shows that I did with Sylvia Young, singing and dancing, and doing things like Bugsy Malone. I did Fun Food Factory on the TV for cookery series. I can't cook, still can't. Did Peter Pan at the London Palladium with Lulu, still a good friend of Lulu's, and it was the start of a new life for me, and getting rid of all that unhappiness that I thought was very unhappy, and it was, into becoming in the business, and which led for me to then become a casting director.
Was Sylvia Young a surrogate mother?
Yeah, I think she was. I mean, even now, she's got a place in Brighton. She's got a place in the same building, sheer coincidence, as me in Brighton. And we went out for lunch not that long ago, and I introduced her as my second mother.
Mm-hmm. Well,
she's everybody's second mother, in all honesty. She's a very warm, cosy, very motherly figure.
She later went on to run a very famous theatre school, and you were on This is your life. Do you
You
remember?
have done your homework, yes?
I try, Paul. Do you remember what you said about her on that program?
No. Do you?
No, I think it still exists, but I haven't seen it.
Does.
Do you remember if she remembered who you were?
Oh, yes, so she did. Oh, yeah. She,
Oh,
I mean, we've remained in touch throughout the whole 50 years,
oh,
which, you know, very much so. We've never really drifted apart at all. Her and her family, they're very much family. Her family are very much family to me.
oh, that's nice. Now, at some point after doing these little jobs that Sylvia put you up for, you must have decided that acting wasn't for you. So, briefly, how did you become a casting director?
Well, what happened was, as you know, when you're an actor, you audition for things. So I went up for an audition with a cast via a casting director, who then said to me, "Would you like to come and work for me in your six?" Because I was still at school, in your 6 weeks holidays, and come and work in the office. And I did, and contrary to what you just said about I wanted to give up being an actor, I didn't want to. I was going to go back to acting, but after 2 or 3 years of being working for a casting director as his assistant, I decided that seeing the other side made me not so keen to rush back into acting. And I don't really have any regrets about that.
I want to ask you a few questions about being a casting director. And
Go
number
on.
one is, have you made anyone a star?
Well, I have worked with a lot of people who've become stars.
Okay.
So whether I was in, like David Walliams, for instance, was always auditioning for me and coming up for things for me. Luke Evans, who was just on the TV in a big TV series, he was auditioning for me. Jude Law. I mean, the list is. When I look back, I think, my God, the people that I knew in their very early stages of their career. Whether I can't say I mean, Alan Cummings did a film for me when no one knew Alan Cummings was, and they didn't really want him. It was, oh, we really want John Gordon Sinclair, and John Gordon Sinclair wasn't free, and lo and behold, I talked them in. I said, "You've got to have Alan. He's going to be brilliant." After 2 days, they all turned around to me and said, "Thank you for Alan Cummings. He's brilliant." Lenny Henry was playing the genie, and in Bernard and the Genie, and Alan Cummings got the part of Bernard, and it was a very successful film.
I asked this of one of my other guests. Does Alan Cumming ever say, "Thank you, Paul, it's all because of you"?
He hasn't had that chance just yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing from Alan. I love Alan. He's a sweetheart. I'm sure he thinks it. He'd like to say it.
Um, a tough job being a casting director. Does it involve you seeing every film ever made, going to every first night? Because you've got to be aware, surely, of every actor working in the UK.
You've got to do as much as you can. I mean, going to a first night isn't crucial, but going to see the play is. And, you know, yes, watching things that you probably wouldn't choose to watch ordinarily, but if it's got a big cast or a cast that you don't know a lot of people in it, you have to go. That is part of. I mean, there's worse things you could have to do than sit through a play or a film or a TV series. But you know, sometimes you think, well, what am I doing watching this? Or you've seen something 10 times and you've got to go and see it the 11th time because there's a new cast. And you don't know, you know, like if I never see Les Mis again, love it as I do, I've seen it so many times, from literally from the previews to up until it was still on. You know, but I've seen it so many times, but it's always good to go and see new people. And it's important to see, it really is important for me and for every casting director to go and support them. And of course, possibly give the actors work.
Okay, so what's the process? An employer gets in touch with you and says, "I'm looking for an elderly man, bald with a goatee in a black polo neck sweater," and then what happens next?
Well, what happens? A director will brief me, as indeed how you've just described, and sometimes you can sort of chip in a little bit and say, well, does he have to have a goatee beard? What about if he's got lots of curly hair or something? It might be quite interesting. And so you can throw a few ideas, and a lot of directors are very open to discussing it, and some will say, no, that's exactly, I know what I want. I don't want to see anyone else other than that fits that description. Others will, particularly if you can say, I went to see Les Mis or went to see Phantom of the Opera, and there was this brilliant guy. I'd love you to meet him for this. He's not exactly how you've described, but he really could bring something to the role. And that used to happen quite a bit in my early career with regards to race or sexuality, both of which were very big walls to climb over for me in the early days. Now it's gone full swing. It's gone the other way, which is great. I think it's a bit unfortunate that it has to be all or nothing, but in the early stages it was really quite a difficult slog.
So the reason that quite often the casting director gets a major credit at the beginning of the film is that they can be quite influential on the film itself. Who knew?
Yeah. Well, we now, if you get for films, we get a BAFTA. You can get a BAFTA nomination. It took years for that it took years to get that credit. Can I tell you? And it took years for BAFTA to acknowledge the contribution that casting directors make. And often casting directors, who go to drama schools and see people before out in the big wide world, watch child actors become adults and watch them grow and learn, and they then put them forward to directors. So it's a long process and it can take years, and it's very important that other people recognize that.
Well, going to have to bring this up, Paul, sorry, but the word that often goes in the same sentence as casting is couch. Now, in your experience, I'm not going to ask you any embarrassing questions here. You don't have to
Right.
look worried, but in your experience, did it exist? Were you aware of it? Was it a myth? What's your take on it?
It's a bit of a myth, in all honesty. I mean, actors and casting directors do meet because it's and some of them might go out for a drink with, become social. But I think that the question should be: do casting directors misuse their position?
Yeah.
I think that's the question. I mean, I'm friendly with actors. I mean, I go out with Leslie Joseph, but it doesn't mean say we're having an affair or I'm misusing my position as a casting director with Dorian from Birds of a Feather. But I think I would be incredibly disappointed and surprised if somebody was confrontational with an actor and misusing their position. I don't think that goes on. No, I don't. I really don't. I've never had anyone come to me like an actor and say X has been inappropriate towards me. We all know what's gone on in America, which is absolutely horrific. But casting directors don't really give you the job. They can introduce you to the director or a producer, and it's very good to have them on your side because they get you through the door. But once you're through the door, it's up to the actor to get themselves that job. A director or producer, which is obviously what's happened in America, are a little bit more of a powerful position, can say, you'll get, I'll give you that job.
Well, the casting couch was probably in its heyday a very long time ago, in Hollywood in the 1930s. And possibly because of the Me Too movement, it's a term that will actually disappear.
Yeah, possibly. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it is a bit of a myth, but I don't work in America, but I think it's a bit more of a thing there. And some people have said to me that the actors in America, are quite flirtatious with casting directors and producers themselves. I'm not saying, we know that, if we want something done, we flirt with somebody. It makes things a lot easier.
True. Now, let's.
I know you do.
We all flirt a bit, don't we?
We do indeed.
Let's be honest. Let's talk about some of the other things that I mentioned at the top of the show. You've done a few things, including, now this is hard to believe, but this is something you did 20 years ago. Now, who remembers this? It was an early reality show called Soapstar Superstar, and you were a judge. Now,
What?
uh, forgive me if I get it wrong, it's a long time ago, but I think you were looking for a new family, and the prize was going to be 4 new parts on the soap Emmerdale. Is that what it was all about?
That's exactly what it was about. Yeah, it was. I mean, I was at first I was a little uneasy about the whole premise of the program and whether I agreed with it or whether I thought it would be the right thing for me to do. And in the end, I thought, well, have I got much to lose by doing it? We were touring the country. I'd never been around England, to be perfectly honest with you. And I thought, well, it's a good opportunity to do that. It was in the summer. I was getting paid. I was meeting new people with the potential of putting them in a soap opera. And at the time, we got criticised saying we're taking work away from actors. But in all honesty, we didn't stop actors from coming up for the part. You know, they could, okay, it's not an orthodox procedure to hold auditions, but that's what it's what goes on now a lot more. They're doing street casting and getting people, you know, that aren't actors. You know, most people now in commercials aren't actors. They're just, you know, from the big wide world.
It's true, you were ahead of the curve, but a year after it went out, the first time I interviewed you was for this magazine. So this is, you can see the date there, 2002. Do you know what I had the nerve to say to you?
Go on.
I said that there are those who claimed that the parts had been cast long before the show went out, and
Yeah.
that the auditions were just a scam.
Right.
Who
No, it was not true at all. Not at all.
wasn't?
No, no, not at all. In fact, it was right up to the wire before we decided who we went for, and we often didn't. The three judges, me being one of them, we often didn't agree, and we often didn't agree with the producers. So, and I think that would have been, that wouldn't have been something I could have gotten along with, because that would have been a total waste of time and a farce, and I'd have had to lie on television all the time, and I couldn't have done that, because we weren't just doing soap stars, we were promoting it left, right, and centre on This Morning and you know, all TV programs. I couldn't have sat on those live TV programs and lied. I just couldn't have done it.
What happened to the family? Are they still in Emmerdale?
They're not. They did about. I think they did 6 months or 9 months or something like that. But I always get asked that question, and I always say there are other programs which were probably more successful. I mean, where's Michelle McManus now? Where's Steve? What's his face? Who won the first? You know, and these were high-profile programs. Where's Hearsay now? Okay, we know Mylene Class has gone on. What's happened to the others? But it's not that I'm looking for an excuse to say, is that these things have a shelf life. And, you know, it would be odd if that family was still in it 20 years later. Let's be honest.
Let's be honest.
It's actually just an insight to show people how crazy auditions can be.
Mhm. We're coming up to the halfway point, Paul. We're going to be talking about a lot more stuff
Ooh.
in a minute, including our mutual friend, the well-known, indeed renowned homosexual Julian Clary.
Oh,
But
yeah, I love Julian.
right now, we're going to take a break, have a look at a trailer for a Peccadillo production. I've just received a message saying that the trailer is for something called Reinventing Marvin. Let's have a look at it, and please join us again in a couple of minutes.
Ma mère, elle soupçonnait pas du tout ce qui m'arrivait au collège.
Qu'est-ce que t'as sur la figure, toi? Y'a eu de la baston ou quoi?
Elle me posait pas de questions, elle était pas très attentive.
Mais si t'as encore le squelette, c'est pas bon.
Je suis pas très bien fort.
Qu'est-ce que vous faites là, bijoux?
J'ai raté le bus, madame.
Vous n'allez pas rester là à traîner comme ça.
Tu veux essayer, Marvin? Essayer quoi?
D'improviser?
T'as passé un monde, toi? Une vraie gonzesse, vous avez fait de lui, sérieux?
En vrai, la journée, t'es même pas foutu d'aller chercher Marvin.
Le moins vivant cramera pas une goutte d'essence pour ces conneries de théâtre. Pourquoi il nous fout la honte comme ça aussi avec sa manière de péder?
je me suis sauvé pour devenir quelqu'un d'autre, c'est-à-dire soi-même.
Puisque vous êtes comme moi, bah, faites quelque chose de votre différence.
Bravo. Belle éducation.
Isabelle Huppert. Bonjour. Marvin, tu verras, c'est un garçon très intéressant.
Mais j'en doute pas.
Quel est votre rapport avec le théâtre?
Je fais un seul en scène. Votre avis compte énormément pour moi.
D'où ça vient ça? D'où le tient ça, lui? Je l'ai cogné, moi? Moi, ouais, j'ai été cogné, moi.
C'est nos vies que tu traînes dans la merde. T'es en train de nous tuer tous.
C'est pas plutôt l'inverse? C'est pas plutôt vous qui avez essayé de me tuer moi?
Je vous aime comme vous êtes. C'est pas ce qu'on est qui compte. C'est ce qui est au fond de nous.
Welcome back. That was Reinventing Marvin. I'm David McGillivray, and I'm here with my special guest this week, Paul de Freitas. We have a mutual friend, as I mentioned before, Julian Clary, and here's something that you won't know. Julian was also a judge on a TV program. It was called All Rise for Julian Clary, and on one occasion, we set him up. We secretly rehearsed a case which he knew nothing about. And what happened during the recording at BBC Television Centre, he turned to his stooge, June Whitfield, and said, "What's the next case, Auntie?" And she said, "I'm afraid it's you, dear." He was put in the dock, and on came somebody who charged him with something. Needless to say, it was my guest, Paul de Freitas. What happened, Paul?
Well, Julian had lived with me for a period of time, just purely as friends, and we got on like a house on fire. But the last day that he was staying with me, he broke a vase. He'd gone out for a cigarette while I'd gone round the shop, came back, there was a vase smashed on the floor, and he'd written a note, he'd left, "What have I done? I'm ever so sorry. I'm sure this has cost a fortune." And so, skip forward to this program. They then said, "Why don't you accuse him of breaking your vase and like smash and run?" So I said, "Well, all right." And we did that, and it was all we had to keep. They had to keep me out of the way at the studio. I was with June Whitfield quite a bit, rehearsing what we were going to do, and Frankie, Julian's sister, was there as well. And we were all having a lovely, lovely time. But Julian doesn't like surprises. So when this surprise, flared up in front of him, he was not particularly happy about it. And he wasn't cross with anybody. He certainly wasn't cross with me. He just doesn't like surprises. And so this is what I was going to ask you. What was the program I did that never went out? It was this. It never went out.
It was never broadcast.
No.
I have to say, it is very funny because everyone works very well on it. And it just so happens that I've got a copy of it. It's never been seen anywhere, but there's just a chance that it may turn up on Patreon, only for Patreon subscribers. It might not. I can't say anything more about that. But
then subscribe to your channel, because I've never seen it.
The only way to find out is to become a Patreon subscriber. Shall we put the link up there again now? Yeah. There it is. Now, Julian and Paul went on holiday to Istanbul. Now, this is something else that nobody knows about, but they had a wonderful time, and Julian came back and told me about what had been going on in Istanbul. I said, we've got to put that into the next show, and we did. So there was a long sequence in this show, I can't remember which one of his tours it was now, in which he described what went on in Istanbul with somebody who wasn't named, but I can now tell you it was Paul de Freitas. What was happening in Istanbul, Paul? The men would not leave you alone, apparently.
It was absolutely incredible. From the minute we got on the plane to go there to the minute we came back, we didn't stop laughing. We had such a hoot. And also, we were literally mobbed by people. They were stopping. I mean, I actually said to Julian, have you had a TV show that's gone out over here? He said, no, never. He said, I've never done a thing for Turkey or Istanbul, or it's just been incredible. I mean, people were like stopping and like waving to us in the street, and we did one of those bus tours, went around the town, and people were waving to us I mean, it was just incredible. We couldn't believe it.
No, Paul, let's get this straight. They weren't mobbing Julian; they were mobbing you.
Exactly. Because I looked at Julian and said, it's not me, it's you. And some people, one guy, we worked in a lamp shop, and I said, well, how much is that orange lamp? And I won't use exactly the words that he used, but he said, basically, I'd like to make love to you. I said, well, I only want to know how much the lamp was.
And that did go into the show, yes, with the original exchange, I can tell.
Yes.
I mean, let's face it. He said, "Come with me, and I will fuck you very hard," and that was used throughout this sequence.
Your words, not mine, but his as well.
Very, very, very funny.
Yeah.
We're going to have to mention this film now before we get on to Miss Paulina. Okay, so this is a film called Banksy's Coming to Dinner. Now, a remarkable film. Talking of the aforementioned IMDb. I have reviewed it on IMDb, and I can just tell you briefly what this film is. So this is what I've said. 6 years after being sacked as the chairman of London's ICA for criticising modern art, entrepreneur Ivan Massow made his debut as a filmmaker with this attack on modern art. It's difficult to know what to make of it, except that perhaps it was intended as a work of art itself. Now, the amazing thing about this film, which you can see on YouTube, it's practically the only place it's ever been shown, but it's got an incredible cast. It's got Joan Collins, Stephen K. Amos, Helen Lederer, and of course, Paul de Freitas, all shot in a day, apparently. And you said to me, none of us had a clue what was going on. Can you elaborate?
Well, Ivan had been trying to get this off the ground for ages, and he asked me to cast it. And I said, it's just not for me. It's just not my sort of thing. And then he said, well, would you be in it? So I said, well, why not? Once again, a bit like the Soapstars thing. I thought, well, what have I got to lose? And I had worked with Joan. I'd worked on Dynasty way back in the dark ages, and I said, I kind of know Joan, and she is such a lovely person, contrary to the character that she plays in Dynasty, which is an amazing, Alexis, who's fabulous. But she's nothing like that. She's incredibly kind and lovely and warm and friendly. I said, nice to see Joan. Did I know Stephen K. Amos? I knew of him. I thought, why not? But none of us understood what was going on. I remember walking in with Anne Mitchell, who was in EastEnders not that long ago, and did All Lost TV series years ago. And she's a wonderful actress. And I said, I've got no idea what's going on. And she said, I've got news for you, nor have I. And we just walked into the dining room. We didn't know what to expect.
Well, look, have a look at it. Banksy's Coming to Dinner. It's on YouTube. The comments underneath are not kind. That's all I can say. But it's unlike anything you've ever seen. You may not get through the whole film. It's only an hour. But have a look at it, and have a look at Paul de Freitas giving a remarkable performance. Now, the time has come, Paul, to deal with Miss Paulina. Now, this is going to be a shock. Do you remember this?
I do remember it, actually. I can't believe that it was 10 years ago that I did that interview for you, for that magazine, that filthy, disgusting magazine, which I can't put down.
Oh, dear. What we could do is I could just ask you the questions again that I asked you 10 years ago, because you described exactly what a T-girl was. I mean, it was fairly new then. You were fairly new to it, and a club called Sweet Wednesday, which of course has been closed now since last March.
Sadly.
Also, a site called TV Chicks. I did look that up, and that does still exist. But let's explain what a T-girl was and indeed is. And to get us into this was the first question I asked you. I can probably just wind you up now and you'll just tell me everything I want to know. But the first question I asked you was, what sort of man is your type?
Straight, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've always liked butch, straight men. Now, whether they actually are straight is, particularly in this day and age, certainly 10 years on from that interview. I mean, I've realised there's straight and there's gay, and there's a lot of grey in the middle. So that may have come to a bit of a shock to me then, but not so much now. So I've always gone for the butch type, and the butch type have always gone for me. And straight men have always, even before I started, Miss Paulina came along, straight men were always attracted to me, if not sexually, as a person. I think because I'm non-threatening. I think they thought, bit camp, a little bit, they could say anything to me and it wouldn't shock me. And I enjoyed listening to their stories. I've always gone better with straight men or straightish men than I have with gay.
So what had happened was that relatively recently, within the previous year, you had discovered this club, one of many, in fact, in which men dressed as women generally appealed to straight men, many of whom were in fact married and playing away. And I said to you, have you always found straight men attractive? Well, you've already answered that question. So this is why you started, dragging up, I suppose, really.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know then about the first time you met a man who knew you were a man in a frock and went ahead with it.
Yeah, because it's fabulous. Because some people say to me, "Don't you feel awful about dressing up and kidding men that you're a woman?" I said, "I wish I looked that good." No, they want you. They know full well what they're getting up to. I mean, I don't know if I can't remember I haven't read that article for 10 years, but I can remember, because I was thinking about doing this chat into. I remember long before Miss Paulina really came along, I went to the Porters drag ball, and I had my own hair, and some people did my makeup, and I got this a dress that was once owned by Dame Anne and Eagle. I squeezed myself into that, and then I walked down Horse Guards Parade and ended up in the stables with one of the soldiers with a horse looking over me, and I was like Jane Mansfield in one of her, Remember Hay, and it was fantastic. It was wonderful.
I said to you, what is a straight man getting out of sex with a man dressed as a woman?
I don't think they see it in that way. I think it's a different kind of sex that they have. It's certainly things that they probably wouldn't dream of doing with their wife or their girlfriend. And they kind of feel relaxed, and all the guys I know are very chilled out about it. There's very rarely any angst about it, particularly not in this day and age. I go on Fab Swingers, which is also another site like TV Chicks. All the guys say straight, but looking to meet TV TSs. I thought, well, how straight is that?
How indeed, yeah, that's of course transvestite, transsexual. Let's just this is how Miss Paulina looked.
Oh yeah, 10 years ago.
10 years ago. How about that?
God.
There we go. And I said to you, what's the difference really? Because presumably when you get together with somebody, the clothes come off. You're not a woman anymore. So what's it all about?
Once again, I don't think they see it like that. I think if the wig came off and the makeup came off, I think they'd freak out.
Yeah.
I think the dress doesn't worry them too much. I mean, I say a lot of them want to know. I was mentioning to you earlier that one of my logos on my Fab Swingers page is the girl with a little bit extra, and the guys will say, "How big is that little bit extra?" And these are they claim to be straight.
They know what they're getting, and they're also, and this intrigued me particularly because I knew nothing about this at all. They can be versatile. In other words, they're passive and active.
Very much. I mean, it's quite disappointing if you are, and most T-girls are passive, but the ones that really are ka-ching, versatile, or in some cases top. And but a lot of the guys are very intrigued about what's going on, but in that department.
And you said that in many cases, T-girls are prepared to do a certain amount of things that their wives and girlfriends are not prepared to do.
Definitely. And I think that's good. I mean, some people call it the third sex because it's, they're not women. Obviously, they're certainly not women, and they're not, and they don't like being men. In fact, I know a T-girl that won't meet a guy unless she's dressed. If occasionally a guy might say, well, as long as you put a little bit of makeup on. No, she has to do the full thing because otherwise she doesn't see them as straight anymore.
Fascinating.
A lot of it is what goes on in your head. I'm not dissimilar to that in a way, but getting ready is a bit of a bore.
After 10 years, yes, it must be, but the novelty hasn't worn off.
No, it hasn't, because every time I get dressed, and particularly if I get dressed and go out, which is I usually do, I always have a good time, always have a laugh. Men will always stop and have a good, and even girls, they love it. People love it. And I've never had, touch wood, any hostility whatsoever. Only the complete opposite. I've had people say, can I take a picture? You look fantastic. I mean, I've got a picture on my phone because I went to some, I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, just there we are. That's it. Who is that with you, Paul?
That's Paulina with Grayson Perry, and Grayson Perry, fabulous, great character and great artist. And 2 minutes later, I was walking. That was done on the South Bank. 10 minutes later, some big black guy tried to pick me up. And in fact, black guys love T-girls.
That's what I heard as well. Now, you and Grayson are different because he likes dressing, cross-dressing, but he's straight. Yes?
Yeah. Well, as far as I know.
Yeah. As far as we know.
Married.
Yes. Well, but do you hang out together, or was that just a one-off?
Just a one-off.
Always one.
I mean, no, but there are, in one of the clubs that you mentioned, Sweet Wednesday, where that picture was taken, some guys go down there and get dressed, and they go down there with their wives. And the wives are with them while they're getting ready in the room upstairs, putting the makeup on, and it's quite a naughty club. So it's, the women seem to, or some women seem to be quite cool about it.
Isn't it interesting? I said to you 10 years ago, you were like the kid in the candy shop because you went on to TV Chicks, that's spelled CHIX, just in case you look it up, and you were inundated. You were getting calls every other minute.
Yeah, messages galore on Fab Swingers, TV Chicks. You just get absolutely inundated. And when the Olympics was on in London, and they brought in all those soldiers to the army to help at the Olympic Park, one of the sites crashed because they're all trying to pick up all the T-girls. They all said, "Oh, we're working at Stratford at the moment." I thought, "Oh, I know where." It was intriguing, but it is. I mean, I wish I had the answer to why guys or straightish guys like T-girls, and I don't, because I think it's a mixture of reasons. I mean, the obvious thing, a lot of people will say, well, of course, they're not comfortable with their sexuality, but it isn't that. I think that, or I don't think, or it's not only that. It's that I think they feel much more comfortable. They can do things that they can't do at home, and there's no pressure, and because the T-girls make a big fuss of the guys as opposed to them having to make a big fuss of the girls. I'm not saying I think it's right whether they're sort of playing around behind their wives' or girlfriends' back, but that's something you'll have to take up with them.
It is true that we don't have all the answers, but it seems to be a very wide spectrum of sexuality that we still don't fully comprehend. Paul, do you think you've discovered something that you're going to carry with you now for the rest of your life?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, it's very strange in the lockdown that Paulina has been put away, and I'd missed her. So I know at one point I said to you it's a bit of an act. I think that actually there is a Paulina somewhere. Do you know? It's that's inside me that, and I missed her. I got dressed and I just sat on that sofa and watched the telly.
Is there an outside chance of a relationship coming up?
For Paulina or for me or both?
Well, aren't you one and the same?
No, I don't see myself like that. No, not at all. No. There is somebody that has just split up with their girlfriend, originally met Paulina. He was with a girlfriend. He split up with the girlfriend. He's now quite happy to see Paul. And that is quite a unique situation. There are others that do not want to see Paul at all. Don't want to be referred to Paul, don't want to hear about Paul. It's all about Paulina.
Isn't this interesting? Oh,
Yeah.
we could continue this, and
You should have her on the show.
well, we're going to continue it on Patreon right now. I'm going to give you the link. Here it is right now, because an extra 15 minutes of this now, just for Patreon viewers, but for you, my dears, on YouTube, this is where we have to leave it, and where I have to say, oh, Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Lovely to be with you.
Thank you. Will you join us again same time next week? I hope you can, because I'll be back with another exciting guest. For now, though, unfortunately, it's goodbye from me, David McGillivray. Mwah. Join us again next week. Bye-bye.